Hello, hello. Welcome to the Nothing is Wasted podcast. Thank you so much for joining me again for yet another great conversation. If you're new, welcome. If you've been around for a while, welcome back. And we're so grateful to have you here joining us. Each and every week, we release conversations with people who are partnering with God to take back their story and they're running straight into the storm. What do you do? What do you do when life hits you with storms you never saw coming? Do you run into it? Do you run away from it? Most of us, we run away, we hide, we try to wait it out. I mean, think about the natural, right? Sometimes you can see storms coming from a mile away, especially if you live where I live and kind of flatlands of Indiana. You can see a rolling thunderstorm across the summer sky, and you can feel the atmospheric shift. You can feel the little cool breeze. You know, okay, you know what? It's gonna rain. We're gonna catch some of this storm. Sometimes they pop up out of nowhere. And whether you are a meteorologist or not, honestly, I feel like all of us are on the same playing field. It's kind of 50-50. We never really know. The weather is pretty unpredictable for most of us. And sometimes life's storms can feel the same way. You know, I've always been intrigued by the American buffalo because the American buffalo face storms head on because they know it's the shortest path through the storm. Like running into the storm is the shortest path through the storm. Running away from the storm actually prolongs the duration that you're in the storm. But like meeting it head on actually expedites the duration that you're in the middle of the storm. And the metaphor of the American buffalo running into the storm has shaped my guest life and ministry. I have today joining with me Pastor Josh Turner, and I believe his perspective is going to reframe how you see your own struggles today. Josh has been a pastor for over 20 years, a husband for 21 years, a father walking the long road of raising a daughter with profound special needs, and he's experienced deep personal storms. We'll talk about those today in this conversation, including crisis in ministry, betrayal, disorientation in faith, navigating marriage and parenting in the midst of immense challenge with special needs in the equation. Many of you guys are here and you've experienced church hurt, but you ever considered that pastors experience church hurt too? And that when you are involved in any kind of institution or organization that involves people, hurt people tend to hurt people. And you can walk out of that fire feeling really burned. But you can also walk out of the fire being unscathed because of what God does in your heart. And that is what Josh now has dedicated his life to do, is helping pastors, especially with soul care. He has a organization called the 1010 Project where he really focuses on soul care for pastors and leaders. And he's just released a book called Into the Storm, How to Face Down Any Crisis with Deep, Unshakable Faith. And man, I love this conversation. One of the things he talks about, and I'm going to tease it right here, but he goes into it in depth, is this idea of not rehab, but prehab. Like how important it is. We say it this way: train for the trial that you're not yet in. How important it is to build some fortitude in your spirit, in your heart, in your mind, in your body, so that you can withstand the storms, so that your house, Matthew chapter 7, right? Wise man, foolish man. Your house doesn't fall like the foolish man who built his house on the sand, but it stands firm. And we talk a bit about why waiting until you crash is just too late, but you can actually create intentional, preventative soul care that can weather any kind of disaster or devastation before it happens. We talk a bit about ministry betrayal. We talk about identity. Like, what does it look like to be a son of God or a daughter of God, not just a servant of God? So many of us who are in ministry, we can tend to our identity gets entangled in that. And I see that, man, I'm prone to that every single day. That I build my identity on what I can do, or that I have this false belief, this false narrative that people only care about me because of what I can offer them or what I can do for them or the way that I encourage them, or like, no, but to actually go back to being a son or a daughter of God and building our identity in that. Josh and I talk about some of the key ways to make sure that you're kind of doing that check, right? That internal checkup every so often to see where your identity is. And of course, we talk about marriage and family dynamics in this conversation. We talk about what it looks like to choose perspective, that how we see our suffering really shapes the way we move in our suffering. In fact, what's interesting about this is I saw a t-shirt the other day that said, and you've probably heard this, I can't remember who coined this phrase originally, but the t-shirt said this: pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. Think about that. Pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. And this t-shirt was on my son runs cross country for his school, and it was on a team, one of the cross country teams at this invitational, and they had that on the back of their t-shirt. And I know that's a motivational phrase that says, you know what, we're going to endure pain. We're going to have pain because we're about growth and progress and competition, and we're trying to become better. We're trying to become stronger, and you can't get stronger without pain. You just can't. It's just a natural way of how this universe operates and how God has invited us into his ways. But suffering and pain are actually different things. Suffering is our perspective on pain. You know, M. Scott Peck talks about this, kind of throws it back to Viktor Frankl, that suffering ceases to become suffering once we accept it. That a lot of our suffering is just the wallowing in of and the desiring not to be in that suffering. So we suffer about the suffering. We suffer about the pain, as opposed to accepting it and going, you know what, this is what's going on. This won't always be this way. So buying into the lie that this is always how it's going to be, or this is what I do. This is what I bring on myself all the time. Instead of buying into that lie, choosing a different narrative and saying, no. I'm going to run into this. I'm going to accept it. I'm going to face this storm. We're going to learn from it. We're going to grow. And we're going to walk out of the fire now unscathed, not even smelling like fire. And that's why this conversation is so encouraging. It was encouraging to me to have this conversation with Josh. I'm super excited about you listening in on this conversation. Again, the book is called Into the Storm: How to Face Down Any Crisis with Deep, Unshakable Faith. We've put links at the bottom of this YouTube video and in the show notes if you're listening to this on a podcast application. Before we dive into the conversation, there's a couple things that I want to bring to the forefront. One, we are taking pre-orders officially for a brand new devotional called Hope in the Valley. Now, so many of you guys have purchased, you picked up, somehow you have read the Pain to Purpose 42-day devotional, and it has encouraged so many of you guys. I'm so glad, so grateful that you guys have picked that up. That started way back when when we first started this ministry, and I was coaching different clients through their own pain journeys, and I wanted to write devotions for them each day for 42 days that they could pick up and read as they're walking through this healing journey. And that's done so well. It's encouraged so many of you guys that we decided, you know what, we should write another devotional. But this time, instead of writing all 42 entries, I wrote 6 of them, and I invited a bunch of my friends to also contribute to this. Friends of the podcast, folks that you have heard, people who have incredible stories. And this devotional, Hope in the Valley, is covering the book of Psalms and how we see our pain through the book of Psalms. And it features and highlights different stories of people that maybe you've heard or maybe you haven't heard, most of which have been on the podcast. But we've brought on different collaborators for this project, like Carissa Sprinkle, one of our Nothing is Wasted coaches. She's been featured on the podcast a few times. Lamoris Crawford, Daniel Brooker, Ron and Nan Deal, Aubrey Sampson has contributed to this. Vanitha Reisner, by the way, I just stayed with Vanitha and her husband Joel at their house for a trip that I was doing, and just such a sweet couple. It's the first time I've had her on the podcast a few times, but I've never really interacted with her in person. It was so great. What rich conversation and visiting that we had there at their home. But Vanitha contributes to this. Eric Shoemaker, he's been a co-host for this podcast before. Dr. Nicole Wilkie, and so many other people. In fact, my parents contributed to this. This is such a beautiful project. I'm so excited for you to get your hands on it. And pre-orders start now. The entire month of November, we are taking pre-orders for the Hope in the Valley devotional so that we can get this to you before Christmas so that you can give it as Christmas gifts. So right now, as you're thinking about Christmas gifts, thinking about the people in your life who need encouragement, who need hope, who are walking through a valley, or maybe they're not. Maybe just like this conversation we're talking about right now, maybe they need something that's going to help to shape them and fortify them before the valley. I would highly encourage you to pre-order this devotional, 42-day devotional called Hope in the Valley. You can find more information about that at nothingiswasted.com/hope in the valley. You can pre-order today, nothingiswasted.com/hope in the valley. We'll put the link in the show notes and at the bottom of this YouTube this YouTube video, so that you can easily reference that. Also, I want to invite you to my next Zoom call, 5 Steps to Taking Back Your Story, no matter what you're going through or what you've gone through. 5 Steps to Taking Back Your Story. This is an incredible time I do almost monthly, where we get to jump on and have some time where I teach you the 5 steps or principles that I believe everybody's got to go through, or everybody's got to adopt if they're going to take back their story, no matter what they've gone through. And then we have some time of questions and answers and some ministry time, and just time for me to really serve you one-on-one. So I would love for you to join me for that. It is a Zoom call, not a webinar. So cameras can be on, sound can be on. You can ask questions right there. It's a great time of interacting. It's about an hour and a half. And so go to nothingiswasted.com/start here to register for the next 5 steps to taking back your story, no matter what you've gone through. Well, Josh Turner, great to have you on the Nothing is Wasted podcast. Thanks for joining me, man.
Oh, man. Thank you so much for having me.
This is just a delight and a treat. I really respect the work that you're doing, and excited about how you're helping ministry leaders, especially with soul care. I love this idea that you I don't know, I've never heard it before, but the idea of prehab instead of rehab. Yep. It's an unbelievable concept that we'll dive into in just a little bit. But before we talk about your story, this new book, Into the Storm, let's just hear a little bit about who you are and a little bit about your family and what you do. And then we'll dive back into kind of the impetus or the catalyst behind this work.
Yeah, man. So I've been a pastor for over 20 years is one of the things that I do. But I've been married to my wife, Becca, for 21 years. And I have a son that's 22 years old. So if you can do math, I wasn't always a Christian. Do you know what I mean? Like, we have backstories.
That's right.
Thank God for grace. So my son's 22. He is a senior in college, and he is actually studying psychology. He wants to be a psychologist, a therapist. So right now, all he does at home is like try to diagnose me. You know what I mean? Like that's where we're living in life.
With a pre-therapist. Right?
Yeah.
Let me test this out on you, Dad.
I walked into the kitchen one morning. He was reading a book, looking at the book, and then looking up at me, and then looking at the book and looking up at me. And he goes, "You have anxiety." I was like, "Yeah, dog, I know." So he's 22. He's in college. I have a 17-year-old daughter who is severely special needs. She is the 12th known case in the world of a rare genetic disorder. She did not get diagnosed until she was 12 because new genetic testing came out in 2017. Tracheostomy, feeding tube, sleeps on a ventilator at night, drives wheelchairs. What's unique about Riley's, special needs is it's just physical. Like mentally, she's a 17-year-old young lady. And what's really cool is she wants to be a pastor or a preacher. And so 2 weeks ago, she got to preach at a church here in Atlanta. Last year, she preached at a church up in DC. And it's been really crazy, man, to see kind of what God has done in her and through her. And especially because we spoke sign language for 7 years, and they told us she would never talk. And then one day, laying on the floor, playing PlayStation 3 with her big brother, she just started talking, never went back to sign language ever. So the theology of that is PlayStation 3 brings healing.
I was going to say that definitely does not align with what most people are saying about the neural pathways of your brain and the overstimulation of video games. Yeah. But you know what? God can work through anything, right? Dude,
if PlayStation has seen an uptick in sales, it's because of me saying that. You know what I mean? I feel like I should get something.
Sure. You should get some kickbacks for that.
But so I was at one church for 17 years, and some things happened there that I'm sure we'll get into. So we ended up leaving that church. Same time I left that church, daughter lost all of her Medicaid in the state of Florida. So we live in Atlanta, Georgia now, and I work for a number of different organizations. I work at Southeastern University. I just finished my doctorate with them. I do stuff for the ARC, helping pastors stay healthy. And then I work with a church out in Orange County, California, caring for their pastors, helping them build some relationships. But the main thing I really do is the 1010 Project, which is based off of Ecclesiastes 10:10, that says a dull axe requires more work, so use wisdom to sharpen the blade. And what we do is we take pastors through a year-long cohort process of helping them continue to flourish in ministry that is based off of 15 years of research with Biola, Notre Dame, and now we're working with Baylor and Harvard as well. So really everything I do is around the idea of helping people flourish in ministry, life, and then I still preach about 20 weekends out. I have some different contracts with churches. So kind of all of that, but it's all around caring for pastors and churches.
Yeah, that's amazing, man. That's amazing. Well, you know, we always talk about you usually don't get into this kind of work unless you and until you've gone through something really difficult, right? D.L. Moody says, unless a man, God wounds a man deeply, right? He can't use a man greatly. And so you're seeing God use you in some pretty profound ways to bring other people through the middle of their storm because you've walked through your own. I'd love to dive a little bit into, let's talk a little bit about the diagnosis with your daughter. When did you guys find that out? How did that set on you guys? What was that like to realize your life was going to be completely changed? Yeah,
well, we didn't know until she was born in the room. And so it was a total normal pregnancy, and we went in and my wife had a C-section, and, you know, they bring her out and I'm standing up watching the doctors, and I can tell they all start like moving really fast. You know, like I can tell they kind of go into a panic, and they came and got me, took me to a small room and said, "Hey, something's wrong with your daughter. We don't know what it is. We've called an ambulance to transport her to a NICU because we had her at a new hospital that hadn't had the NICU built." And they said she may not even make the ambulance ride. And so, and I remember it was a broom closet they took me into because I specifically remembering they should have better rooms for telling people this information, you know? Yeah. So I asked to see her, and I walk around the corner, and man, they had her hooked up like she was still on an umbilical cord. She had IVs in both hands, both feet, and also in her head. And they were basically like, we have no idea what is going on. And so I had to go back, tell my wife, tell our friends. And, you know, there was this really interesting moment for me of I was walking somewhere in the hospital, either from my wife's room or back to tell people. And I tell people the story all the time. I'm always very careful when I say, you know, I feel like God said, or I heard the Lord or whatever, because we've seen people misuse that for so long. But I was walking by myself, and man, I felt like I heard the Lord say very clearly to me, what do you choose? Like, how do you respond in this moment? And what hit me was, you know, I think so many times in suffering and pain, what we think is it is like an emotional decision, right? Well, my emotions were, I don't know if my daughter's going to make the hospital or the ambulance ride.
Yeah.
And so it was this very clear moment that I felt like the Lord gave me to make a decision in how I responded to suffering and heartache. And if I had gone off of my emotions, it would have been like, nope. You know what I mean? Like it would not have been a good decision, but it was just this moment of clarity where I felt like the Lord was like, how are you going to choose to respond to this? And dude, I remember saying, like, I was standing by the nurse's station. I do remember that. I remember saying to myself, God, whether she lives or dies, I'm with you. And that was like a decision that I made in a moment of clarity, which I honestly just think was the grace of God in that moment for me. And my wife and I responded very differently in it. My wife has super high faith. So from day one, you know, our daughter spent about 3 months in the NICU. At one point, a doctor came to me. He was the head of the NICU in Jacksonville, Florida. And he said, "Hey, I've done $1 million worth of testing on your daughter and everything comes back normal." Wow. And so we didn't have answers, like I said, until she was 12 years old. I mean, she was undiagnosed. And so my wife has the gift of like what I would say is faith. Like she's always just had really high faith. She's like, God's got this. He's not surprised. And I was a pastor and a preacher at the time. And so now everything I thought I knew about how God worked is out the window, right? Like things I've heard people say, things that I've read are out the window. So it took me on a theological journey, man, really, really deeply for about 5 to 6 years of, I say this, and I never questioned did God or Jesus exist. I didn't know how they worked anymore. Yeah. Right. And so it really sent me down this pathway of theology and doctrine for me. Wow. So, yeah.
Man. Yeah. I remember, you know, when I lost my wife, because I was in ministry at the time, you know, pastoring a church, that I had this somehow this like unspoken agreement with God that, you know, we might go through hard. You're planting a church. Of course you're going to go through hard, but we weren't going to go through tragic.
For sure.
And it really disoriented my theology, or at least my functional theology. I would have
100%.
taught, you know, rain falls on the just and the unjust. I would have taught all those things. That would have been cerebral, but I didn't really believe it. I thought I was impervious to pain. Did you have that same kind of crisis of theology, or like having to reset or deconstruct?
Oh yeah, dude. I mean, 100%. Like, you know, it's funny you say that. Like I remember thinking like, God, I'm on your side. Yeah. Like I'm one of your guys. Like I'm you know, and so all of a sudden I'm having to wrestle with, you know, scriptures that people say that are true, but they maybe have been taken out of context a little bit.
Right.
And people have, you know, I say this, if God doesn't do the same thing 100% of the time, the same way in the Bible, you cannot form a theology and a doctrine around it. Right. And what I also learned was that sometimes our suffering will make other people uncomfortable and make them wrestle with God. And so, you know, we just had a lot of well-meaning people say truly terrible things to us. And it did, man. It really rocked my theology. You know, I kind of came from more of a non-denominational, a little bit more of a charismatic type background. So, you know, in that world, you're kind of taught a little bit. I'm not saying this is 100% the case, but like, man, if you believe it, if you pray it, if you have enough, that, you know, a faith of a mustard seed, then God's going to come through and God's going to heal your daughter.
Right.
And then what ends up happening is when that doesn't start happening, or, you know, in some situations you pray for things and they get worse, right? Like it gets harder. So then you're having to wrestle through. So then you're trying to sort through, you know, okay, either God's not who I think he is, or there's the heresy of theology of that I'm doing something wrong and God is punishing me somehow for that. And that's what's causing the sickness. Which, if you're making terrible decisions, let's be very clear, there are earthly consequences, but if you are in Christ, Jesus has already taken your punishment. So God's not up in heaven punishing you for something, because Jesus has already paid for that. Now, you may have earthly consequences, but those are two different things. Or, you know, or there's something about God I don't understand. You know, and that's where I kept coming back to was, okay, if God is good, then if God is doing something that I can't wrap my mind around and I don't think it's good, that doesn't change the character of God. It must just mean my understanding is skewed.
Yeah.
And so I really wrestled with, okay, well, this type of theology isn't working, right? This, you know, kind of charismatic, non-denominational, whatever. I'm praying, I'm believing, we're anointing with oil, we're doing all the things the Bible says, and she's not being healed the way that I think she should be healed.
Yeah.
So then, because I'm a super level-headed person, dude, I swing hardcore Calvinist.
You went all reformed.
Dude, I just went. I mean, I'm talking, if I am as my wife says, I am a man of extremes. You know what I mean? Like there's no, so then I go super hardcore Calvinist. And then I start wrestling with, okay, if I go fully down this route, then why does anything matter?
Exactly. Yeah.
Like why does anything matter? Like, why do I preach? Why do I share the gospel? Yes, the Bible says that, but if everything is predestined, why does any of this matter? And so, dude, I'll never forget, Matt Chandler has become a very good friend of mine. And this is when, if you remember, when Chandler had brain cancer.
Right.
And so Matt filmed a video, and this is how he and I became friends, because I tried to share the story with like one of my like, you know, ministry heroes. I'm like sobbing as I tell him, like making a fool of myself. Yeah. And Matt recorded this video to his church, and he was basically saying, hey, I have surgery tomorrow. I don't know if I'll ever be normal again. Yeah. I don't know if I'll ever pastor this church again. I don't know if I'll ever whatever. And he said, and everybody keeps asking me, did God cause this or allow this? And that's what I was wrestling with, causation versus allowance. And I had gotten so deep into it that I could argue scriptures with myself, right?
On both sides of the coin.
Both sides, dude.
Absolutely.
So Matt said, he goes, everybody keeps asking me, did God cause this or allow this? And he goes, and my Reformed brothers are going to hate that I say this. Yep. And dude, when I heard him say that,
yeah,
it like gave me this freedom to not have to have answers. And so we stopped, the question and suffering that so many of us ask is why.
Yeah.
Right. And we try to make sense of the pain, the heartache. Now, if you're making bad choices, you need to figure that out. But
right.
if something just happens,
that's what we call unnecessary or avoidable pain.
Yeah. You selected that pain. And so for us, like I came to this place. My wife never really struggled with this. She just had faith the entire time. And I wish I was honestly wired like that. But we finally came to this place of, okay, the question why, I'm never going to know until the other side of eternity, most likely. Right? God can do whatever he wants, but most likely I'm not going to understand this until I stand face to face with Jesus. So then what we started asking was, instead of why, what do you want me to do with this?
Yeah.
And we just became very open about our journey because we knew other people were going through stuff. And it really gave me an empathy for people, bro, that I didn't have before.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Speak of another reformed voice, the late, great Timothy Keller says, God gives evil enough space in our lives that it ultimately terminates itself.
Yes.
So it's part of this like judo plan that God has in the middle of it. And does that mean God like preordained or caused, or did he just allow with foreknowledge or yes?
Yep.
Somehow we got to find ourselves in the tension of both of those things, and
for sure,
and come to peace with that.
And I think too, man, one of the things that taught me, and I would still say that I'm on this journey definitely, the mysteries of God are so much greater than I can understand.
Yeah.
Right. And my wife always says it this way. She goes, I don't want to serve a God that I can fully explain.
Right.
And I think that's what my daughter has taught me is a lot of different things, but one of them is, man, the mysteries of God. And I've been outlining the Bible for my kids for the past couple of years, like writing a commentary for them. And I've been doing it out of the Message version. And I know it's a paraphrase, so everybody can, calm down. And but because I had read the NLT,
Reform brothers too.
all the Reform guys are like, we're out.
Okay, done.
But I had read the NLT, NIV, ESV so much for writing sermons that what I realized is I would get halfway through an account or halfway through a parable, and in my head I'm like, I know how this ends.
Right.
I know how this whatever. I mean, sometimes, dude, when you read the Message, you're like, I don't even know what story this is.
Yeah, it's like where did you get this, Eugene?
Yeah, you got to go look it up. Yeah. But one of the things I love about the way that Peterson puts it is in the New Testament, he writes a lot. He says, and the disciples realized they were in a holy moment with God, or the disciples realized they were in the mysteries of the Lord.
Yeah.
And I think that's so much what it is, man.
Yeah.
Suffering, if you allow it, it is beautiful and painful all at the same time.
Right.
Because if you allow it, the Lord will show you the mysteries and the depths of who he is through it. But I think it's a choice you make of how you walk through it.
Yeah, that's 100%. What's interesting about it is that can cause some people, when they think about this idea of a mysterious God, you would think logically, you would go, oh, that gives me even more anxiety because I don't have some kind of a pattern, some kind of a template, some kind of I know what's going to happen here. I feel out of control. Yeah. Interestingly enough, in the paradigm of the Lord, right, and upside down kingdom that we operate in, that's what actually gives us peace. For sure. Well, and because here's what it comes back to for me always. It's his character. That's right. Like my circumstances don't change God's character. So if my circumstances make me think somehow that God isn't good, well, that cannot be true. Right. Because if that's not true, then the whole Bible begins to unravel, right? Yep. His character is good. So if there's something in my life that I don't think is good, then I have a limited understanding of what that thing is. Right. And so it's always going back to it's the scene in the New Testament where, Jesus says, or the disciples say to Jesus, hey, show us the Father. And he's like, hey, look at me. If you want to see the Father, look at what I do. And Jesus is good. Like everything he does is good. And that is the character of God. And that's what I always have to come back to is, man, if I don't understand something, that doesn't change God. It just means I don't understand something. That's right. That's right. So every single circumstance that we go through, Josh, you have the opportunity to filter that circumstance through a particular perspective. For sure. And you chose to say, okay, hold on, let me step back and assume with the filtration process of this, let me assume that God is good here.
Yep.
And if God is good here, if what the Bible is saying about God is true, then what might be going on here?
Yep.
And you stepped back and you gained some distance from your own story. You got curious about it, and then God began to show himself to you. But a lot of people approach their circumstances and they make other assumptions where they've already made presuppositions, presumptions about who God is because they've created him in their image rather than really truly understanding the God of the Bible.
Well, and we all want, I say it this way, we all construct God in our hearts in a box. And as long as God is within that box, he is safe and I can make sense of him. Right? And so suffering, trials, heartache, God has a way of destroying boxes or the images or ideals that we have made of him. So you're really left with, okay, either he's not who I thought he was, or I'm so bad he's punishing me, or maybe he's just bigger than I thought I understood him to be.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing. And one of the pieces of advice I got when we had our daughters, we had this pastor on our staff in Jacksonville. His name was Wayne. Wayne had adopted a few special needs kids, and we called him the Mog, the man of God. That was his nickname. We called him. And dude, I would just go into his office unhinged, like, surgeries and trachs, and I'm just a mess, and I'm cussing and crying and just a disaster of a human. Yeah. And he said, hey man, he goes, I want to give you a piece of advice. I go, dude, you can tell me whatever you want. He said, I want you to go back and I want you to read the Gospels. He said, as much as you can, try to read them for the first time. And he goes, and what I want you to specifically try to do is remove theology and doctrine and all the stuff that's in your head. And I just want you to look at how Jesus responds to hurting people. Wow. And dude, I did that. I went through, and what I recognized was, man, every time that someone is hurting, Jesus draws near to them. Jesus is close to them. He may not do it all the way that I want him to all the time.
Yeah.
But that doesn't change that he's always there in that moment with them. And like, that really began to help me. Like, at the end of the day, bro, I landed on Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I can theologize and doctrinize like my brains out, but at the end of the day, it's all Jesus.
So good. Talk a little bit about, okay, so let me try to get this straight. You had a son prior to getting married.
Yep.
And you guys together have a daughter diagnosed with special needs. Okay. Yep. So even within that, inherently there's some complexity, right?
Oh yeah.
But with marriage dynamics, with blending families, with all of that.
We weren't blending families. My son's with my wife.
Okay. So there was some complexity there with just like timeline stuff, all of that sort of deal. So talk about but then also of course, getting this diagnosis. So tell me, how did that impact your marriage dynamics, your family dynamics? A lot of people are walking through these. We have some dear friends who have a severely special needs child. It's actually a vaccine injury. So it was, one of these like totally different story, but they've been very transparent with us about just like how they've had to work through this when it comes to their marriage, because you're both dealing with it in two different lanes, but also at the same time together. And it's kind of like a grief process in a lot of ways. You grieve separately, but you also grieve together. And sometimes you're at different paces and you're in different places. And so just maybe to whatever you feel comfortable with, how does that how did that impact your family dynamics?
Yeah, I'll never forget, man. So I used to travel and preach overseas, like in Europe quite a bit. And on one trip, I had taken two of my best friends that worked with me at the church, and we're walking through downtown London. My wife is at home taking care of our special needs daughter. And dude, out of nowhere, I had this thought. If I was her, I would resent me, right? Like, she's at home taking care of our special needs child. I'm, goofing around London with my friends doing ministry work. And on this trip, we were like in Northern Ireland, London, Sweden, and Copenhagen on one trip, which was a super awesome trip. And my wife's home taking care of our daughter. Yeah. So I just came home and I said, hey, babe, I think we need to start going to marriage counseling. And she goes, we're good. Why? I go, because there's going to be a day we're not. And I want to be preemptive in this. And I shared that story with her of like, man, I would resent me if I'm out doing this. And my wife is amazing. She has always felt like part of her calling is to release me to do the ministries that God has called me to. So I couldn't do it without her. Get choked up talking about her.
Wow.
And so we started counseling, and we started going preemptively. And we had a counselor. He's still a really good friend of mine. He does stuff with me with 1010. He's our head therapist. His name's Aaron Moore. And I'll never forget, we were sitting in one of his office one time, and, you know, we'd have to carry Riley up the stairs to his office, and we'd put noise canceling headphones on her and like put her in another room as she was sitting there. And he looked at us one time, he said, "You two are going to have to grieve the life you thought you were going to have." And, you know, so many times, especially pastors, I think we want to over spiritualize things. And sometimes, man, there is a process that is just grieving and lamenting and going, we thought this is what it was going to be. Now this is what it is. How do we do this? And you can either accept, you know, the new norm and figure out how to live out of that. And I think where people get themselves in trouble is they keep trying to capture what they once had. And life has a way, man, of kicking you in the teeth, and you're not able to get back to that place. But it doesn't mean the place in the future is worse. It's just different.
Yeah.
And so we really, man, we had to work through it. We did, like with our son, we worked really, really hard with our son to try to make his life as normal as possible. And I mean, we pay for him to see a therapist right now. He's 22, and you know, there's some things that come with having a severely special needs sister when you're 5 years old. Yeah. And, you know, there were things like we had to move to Atlanta his junior year because she lost Medicaid because of the diagnosis in 2019. Wow. And that wasn't fair to him, but it was what our family needed to do to take care of her. And luckily the Lord has worked it out amazing. And he actually has the best friends he's ever had. But yeah, man, it was a lot of journeys. And I think it was being proactive that really helped us a lot.
Yeah.
And just having, honestly, just really honest conversations, man. Yeah. Like my wife and I right now, we have nurses that get to our house at 10 p.m., leave at 6 a.m. And when the nurses don't come, which we only have them 2 or 3 nights a week, my wife sleeps on a cot in my daughter's room because she's on a vent at night and all this. And so, man, we just have to have really normal conversations about, you know, I mean, everything from time together to your sex life to everything. It's just honest and open conversation. And what I always say to her is like, and she says to me is, this isn't anybody's fault. Nobody is blaming anybody. This is just the way our life is.
Yeah.
So let's have an honest talk about it and say, how can we move forward in this?
Yeah. I think that's one of the most difficult things in any kind of suffering or grief or trauma, or, you know, slap whatever label you want to on it, whatever we've experienced, that when it comes to the marriage dynamics, what you're saying right there of being able to create space for each other, that you can be honest with each other while at the same time removing any person as the culprit.
For sure.
Right. How do we make sure that it's like, hey, we're not blaming anybody for this. This isn't, let's not take this personal. Let's hold space enough to be able to hear each other's and hold each other's feelings and emotions in this, be a safe space for each other, even if it might be because of something that, you know, I'm doing that's not lining up with your expectations or vice versa. And that is probably one of the most critical hinge pins, what you're describing right there, for a marriage that's going to be thriving, healthy, and abundant through the storm.
Yeah, and if we get to an impasse, we'll go see a therapist together.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? And I think that's the whole thing is like, it's so funny. My wife and I, we watch a lot of movies and stuff together. And I said, you know, movies would be a lot shorter if people were just honest with one another.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think like, you know, we've just kind of made a decision that, hey, like we're going to talk about stuff. And sometimes we're really great at it. And sometimes we're not. You know, and I think that's the temperature you have to keep. And she's really good about that and helps me with that a lot. Yeah,
true. You alluded to it earlier. You experienced a pretty significant betrayal, or, you know, a season where you you were at a church for one season for a number of years, and then it felt like, on a lot of levels, the rug got pulled out from under you. It wasn't exactly what you expected it to be. Yeah. I know a lot of people listening to this, a lot of pastors listening to this, they've experienced betrayal. I mean, we say all the time, we serve an empathetic high priest, right? Who understands what we've gone through. Well, he understands the extent of betrayal. But I'm curious, to the degree you feel comfortable, share with us a little bit about that experience, because I think that really lends, what we've just talked about and what you are about to share really lends toward the work that you're doing with the 1010 Project, the spaces you're creating, this book that you've written. So share with us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I was at one church for 17 years. It was a large mega church, and I had planted out of that church in Orlando, Florida. The church we planted in Orlando honestly grew very quickly. And that wasn't due to me. It was honestly because 3 of the largest pastors in that city, right before we got there, it all kind of had affairs. And so we just planted at this very unique time where, the sheep were scattered, so to speak. And so everything was good in that front. My former pastor that I was with for 17 years, some things happened, and I'm trying to think how to say this accurately. I could not follow him anymore is the best way to say it. And so when he knew, and I kind of went from the heir apparent, favored son, so to speak, to, he knew that I wouldn't follow him anymore on this new kind of path he was taking. And so he had no reason to get rid of me. So basically, he just started trying to accuse me of things. And it was the proverbial, I'm going to throw a bunch of stuff against a wall, and whatever sticks, I'm going to use that. Well, nothing stuck. So it literally ended after 17 years of him saying, either you move back to Jacksonville where we are, or I'll give you a year severance. And so I went on a 3-day fast and prayed, and I realized I could not submit my family to that unhealthy leadership in their life as well, or me. And so I resigned, and it was really, really disorienting, man. I mean, it happened very quickly. I mean, I was an elder. I was an executive pastor of this church for 17 years. I got saved at that church. It was a really disorienting, really, really painful, because there's this other thing, in the church where we would say spiritual authority, spiritual fathers, whatever. Right. And so, which I think sometimes we just use as spiritual manipulation, but that's a whole nother podcast we could do together. And so when I was being accused of things, there's this part of you that goes, am I these things? Am I this way? Is this a blind spot? And I think anytime, we should always look at ourselves too and go, what could I have done different? Yeah. And there's things for 100% looking back, could have done different and could have done better and could have whatever, but it wasn't what it ended up becoming. Yeah. It was just, I couldn't follow him anymore. And, since he's been removed, and it got really, really ugly after I left. And, but it was painful, man. I was legitimately in counseling, for about twice a week for probably about a year. I was on antidepressants for 2 years. And then that same week that I resigned is when our daughter gets her diagnosis and we lose our Medicaid. Wow. And so that all happened in the same week. And you're you're just reeling, right? Your world is turned upside down. You're being accused of things, and then you're being demonized on top of that. And so then our friends were afraid to talk to us because they were afraid they would be fired. And so we've mended all of those relationships. I mean, honestly, everybody has repented to me and my wife. Unfortunately, I've never really heard from my pastor ever again. And I pray for him. I can honestly say this, if he called me tomorrow and said, I need help, I realize I'm not okay, I would drive and pick him up and take him somewhere to get him help. But But that was a long process, because I would say for the first 2 years, I would have fist fought him behind a Walmart parking lot. You know what I mean? Like it was
right, for sure.
And so it took me about 3.5 years, I would say, to fully heal. And a lot of that, man, was counseling. A lot of it was therapy. And really just, I have a friend that says sometimes God will do a good that wounds you to push you to healing.
Yeah.
And God used that pain to reveal to me a lot of things about myself.
Yeah.
I'll never forget, my father-in-law asked me one time, he says, "What have you learned the most through all this?" And I said, if you would have asked me while I was pastoring the church how my relationship was with Jesus, I would have said, it's awesome. Me and Jesus are so good. Then all of a sudden the church is basically taken from me basically kind of within like a month.
Yeah.
And now the thing that I have done for 17 years, I'm not doing anymore. And what hit me was I had built my relationship with Jesus without knowing it. I had built my relationship with Jesus off of how hard I worked for him. And then when that was gone, I had to reconcile, okay, not only who am I apart from being a pastor? And I know that we all know, like, your identity is not what you do, but man, you do anything for long enough and that becomes a part of who you are.
Yeah.
But then I had to really wrestle with, okay, man, I'm really good at being a servant. I don't really know how to be a son.
Yeah.
And that was very painful, but also beautiful at the same time, because it began to push me to this place of healing, of establishing a relationship with the Lord and with Jesus that was not based off of my performance for them.
Yeah. True. Yeah, you almost found yourself in the place of the older son.
Oh, for sure.
Prodigal son of going.
Yeah, dude. I was that older brother for sure.
Yep. Realizing like, oh my goodness, my identity has been entangled in all of this. I was going to ask you, Josh, looking back on it, what kind of meaning do you assign to this? Because it's really hard to look at this senseless kind of situation where all of these things are converging. You may have already answered my question, but now you're able to look back, I know, and go, okay, I see what God is doing here.
Yeah.
And how it's leading to creating meaning in my life now.
Yeah. I think there's probably a lot of answers to that question, in a lot of different ways. Like, I mean, when we left the church, like right after we left, I mean, it got really, really bad. Like everybody else left as well. And so you kind of realize, oh, God saved me.
God was sparing you. Yeah.
Yeah. God was saving me in that moment. And then our main concern was our son and, moving him his junior year of high school. And so I'll never forget, I pick him up from a winter camp and from church, and he gets in the car and he looks at me, he says, "Hey," he goes, "I need to say something to you." And I'm like, okay. He goes, "I know I didn't want to move here the most." He goes, "But I have the best friends I've ever had in my entire life here."
Wow.
And then, he's dating a girl that will probably end up being my daughter-in-law here when they graduate. And you see all this goodness that God did through it.
Yeah.
And then I think it helped me to trust him a lot more.
Wow.
And also what he did, man, is I didn't realize how white knuckling I was on the church. Like how closed fisted, like I'm going to make this happen. I can pull this off. And it was like God pried my fingers off of it. Right. I mean, just pried my hands open. And I tell people today, bro, the best I got with the Lord is a maybe. And I don't mean that like in a bad way. I mean, like when people are like, "Hey, is this what God calling you to?" Maybe.
Wow.
I've just learned to walk open-handed in the direction I think he's calling me.
Yeah.
And your prayer becomes, God, open and close doors. And what I've seen over the past, 6 years of being gone is, dude, God opened doors that I didn't even know there was a door there.
Yeah.
And, so there's a lot of answers to that question. And then I would say too, for people who do have church wounds, dude, I say this. I mean, every time I preach, I say this. Pastors, at the end of the day, we are all broken men doing our best to serve a holy God. And people are going to make mistakes. Now, we are called to a higher standard. I am not skating that. I am not giving permission for anything. I'm not making excuses. And I think I was able to look back, and I'm able to look at guys now that I work with and go, they're just a little broken.
Yeah.
And everybody's brokenness comes out differently based off of what their brokenness is.
Yeah.
And yes, Jesus heals that. And yes, but you hope, and that's why we say what we do is prehab. You hope that you can get ahead of it to not have to like hurt and wound and blow up your marriage and your ministry and all that sort of stuff. But man, sometimes you got to hit rock bottom a little bit before you recognize what's going on inside of you.
Wow. What do you find? I mean, you guys are creating these, first of all, I mean, extremely, it's just very impressive. The partnerships that you've created, this like framework or pathway that you've created for pastors.
Yeah.
But really the crux of it, from what it sounds like, is that you're getting them into environments where they can have really vulnerable conversations in a safe space where they typically are not able to have conversations to disclose things that are going on in their heart, right? You can't do that with a board member, or you don't feel like you can. You don't feel like you can do that with any of your congregants. So why has this become such a driving mission for you? And what are you finding on the front lines of this when it comes to these conversations with pastors?
Yeah, so it became a driving mission, honestly, not even out of my own pain. To be, I mean, like that plays into it now, but it's not out of my pain. In 2020, I run this other thing with a guy named Brad Lomenick called Young Guns that we started 9 years ago. And we basically started taking pastors. Now it's like business guys and actors and musicians. Right. We started taking them up to Colorado. We do some in San Diego now for 3 days, ride horses, and we would talk about how not to blow up your life, right? And like we would bring in, John Eldridge, a friend of ours, Ken Costa comes. Like we've had all these different older pastors come. Mike Foster, who is a great author, and
Mike on the podcast.
Mike is awesome, dude. Mm-hmm. And so we would bring these guys in, and so I had a friend. He was a pastor. He was one of the founding guys of Acts 29. He was an author. He was the chaplain for the St. Louis Cardinals, and he was a little bit older than me. And he had previously had a moral failure. Yeah. And when guys have moral failures, always ask them, what got you there? I don't necessarily care about what you did, but what led you to that is what I'm kind of always interested in. And he was always really honest. And I said, hey, man, would you come and speak to these 60 pastors? And he was like, yeah, man, I would love to. And so we go up to Colorado. There's 60 guys there riding horses, fly fishing, but we're having these like really, really intentional moments, morning and nights with the guys. And I watch my friend, dude, just pastor these guys for 3 days unbelievably well. Yeah. And really beautifully. And then 3 weeks later, he killed himself. And I actually talked to him the morning he killed himself and would have had zero idea. And just absolutely no idea at all. And so then that was the third pastor I knew of in a year that had committed suicide. Yeah. And then I've just lost a lot of friends in ministry, man, to affairs, to sending them to rehab, to weird money stuff. I mean, just, kind of pick your poison a little bit. So I started looking at what was offered to really help pastors stay healthy in ministry. And when you look at the stats from like Barna, Pew, Lifeway, I mean, the stats right now are 3,000 churches are opening a year, anywhere from 4,000 to 7,000 are closing, which is a hard number to track. And then you've got 33% of pastors that are actually looking at quitting the ministry right now. And that denominations already have something called the empty pulpit crisis, where they can't find people to actually fill pulpits when people retire. And so we started looking at what was offered for pastors, and man, you really found one of two things. You found trips that were just 3 to 5 days away that I call relief. And relief isn't bad, right? Like we all need relief. But if you never deal with what you need relief from, then relief becomes like a drug for a drug addict. What once worked doesn't work anymore, and you need more and more and more and more. So you see relief trips, which I do some relief trips for guys as well. I think that's important. Or then what you found was just like restoration, rehabs, like after they've gone off the rails already.
Right.
And you kind of realize, okay, there's this gap where we're not helping guys learn how to flourish thrive, stay resilient in ministry over the long haul. And I think it's a much bigger conversation of, in some circles that I've run in over the years, and I run in quite a few different circles, is, man, just because someone can stand on a stage with a microphone and speak well does not mean that they are fit to be a pastor.
Yeah.
And it does not mean that they have done enough self-discovery to have an accurate self-worth of themselves, their strengths, their weaknesses, the way that God has wired them to do ministry the way that God has called them to. And, and a little bit of the danger in the American church world is, man, we have created systems that you don't necessarily at times have to be quote unquote called. I use air quotes for people listening. But if you run the system, you can grow a church because the system works.
Right.
So what we really wanted to kind of go upstream and say, how do we help guys build practices, principles, and things in their life that help them flourish in ministry?
Yeah.
And so when we got connected with Biola University, and we realized that they in Notre Dame had been studying pastors for 15 years based off of the work that Harvard and Baylor were doing around human flourishing, and they had actually done years and years of research of, hey, if pastors do this, they will stay healthy.
Right.
If they do these things, it will cause them to burn out, have anxiety, depression, not make it, whatever. Then you're like, okay, we can move the tide on this a little bit. And so we take guys through a really year-long intentional process of teaching them things that will help them flourish in 4 areas: resilience, well-being, authenticity, and thriving.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I got tired of losing friends, and man, and I know this, and we all know this. Jesus doesn't need me to protect his name, right? Like he's Jesus. But at the same time, the church doesn't need any more black eyes.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think it's important that we all remember, and this is from a dude that I've been wounded.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, man, it's still Christ's bride.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Oh, man. Josh, this has been an awesome conversation. I'd love for you to share, just kind of in close. I mean, I want to make sure that everybody gets a hold of your book, Into the Storm, How to Face Down Any Crisis with Deep, Unshakable Faith. But just this concept of into the storm, maybe draw back on what we've talked about already today, but like, why did you call it Into the Storm? As opposed to,
whatever,
batten down the hatches during the storm or whatever it is, right? Like I mean, this sounds like an intentional, I'm turning and facing a different direction. I'm going to actually walk through the thing that most people run away from. Yeah.
So I actually wrestled with what to call it. I wrestled with writing it for a long time. And I always said I would never write a book unless somebody asked me. And I had a agent call me one day and said, "Hey man, you don't know me, but your friend gave me your number and said, you got a book in you." And I was like, well, all right, Lord, let's do it. And so it still took me a long time. And the book would not have happened without my wife. My wife was my ghostwriter. I write at like a 5th grade accelerated level. And so she was able to really help me. She knows my voice very well. We've been married, like I said, for 21 years. She really helped the book come to life. But I was really wrestling with like what to call it. And in another life, bro, I wish I could have been a cowboy. Like that's just me. I'm usually wearing like
picked up on that in this conversation.
And full denim. And so I was reading about the American buffalo, which I've always been fascinated with in the Wild West. And a buffalo is the only animal that when a storm comes, it will face the storm and go directly into it because it knows the storm, the effects will be less and the storm will be shorter because it's traveling against it. Every other animal in the animal kingdom, goats, cows, everything, they herd up, seagulls fly just on the outside of the storm. And so we started asking this question, and I started wrestling with, man, what would it look like when storms of life come, instead of trying to herd up or outrun them or never deal with them, that we just turned and faced them and walked directly into them, trusting the God that knows the storm. Wow. And so that's what the whole book is about. So each chapter is like the storm of anxiety, the storm of betrayal, the storm of depression, the storm of not yet. And it's just a really, hopefully a very honest look of, hey, this is part of our story. This is what we see in Scripture. And this is how you can trust God in anxiety and betrayal and all of these different things. When God doesn't do what you think he should, what do you do? Yeah. And you can either run from that or you can just wade directly into it. And so, yeah, that's what it's about. And it's our story with a biblical narrative. I mean, we even talk about my wife and I having our son before we were married. And because that was a storm, but that was a storm of our doing. You know what I mean? Like that was a storm of me at Florida State University. And so, you know, but
said.
So yeah, that's, it's just an honest look at suffering, hopefully.
Yeah. Yeah. We talk about in our course, Pain to Purpose, we talk about 4 perpetrators of pain. The first one is our own sinful choices. It's what we talked about earlier, this avoidable, unnecessary pain. And sometimes that's the most easy one. And on some respects to deal with, you live with the fallout of the consequences of it, but you can at least pinpoint it, recognize it, go, hey, I'm going to learn from that. I'm going to repent from that.
And also like God can redeem it.
Oh yeah.
Right. Like I remember like one of my favorite things my wife and I get to do now is to minister and pastor to couples that get pregnant out of wedlock.
Wow.
And so like, that's part of it, man. It's like,
right.
Hey, there's a right way to do that. You didn't start the way you should have, but it doesn't mean that God can't use it, but you're probably gonna have to make some hard grown up decisions now.
That's right.
You know,
well, you're living in, you know, honestly, several of those 4 perpetrators of pain. Second one is other people's sinful choices, which you experienced quite a bit when it comes to, and yet even as you've assigned meaning to it, I love the fact that you can look back and see the goodness of God, his goodness and mercy following you through all of this. The conversation with your son, with recognizing that God was sparing you. And I just want people who are watching this and listening to this, Josh, to just recognize that while they're in the middle of the struggle, while they're in the middle of the strain, that they may not understand what God's doing, but when you look back, you can see that goodness and mercy have been following you, as Psalm 23 says. Yeah. That's what you're describing right there. And that's why people's testimony of sharing that is so important, because it allows us to borrow faith and go, all right, well, God did that in Josh's life. Yeah. God can do that in my life too. And so I can press in, lean into the storm, even in the middle of this struggle right now.
And it's also, I mean, like, you know, you go back and look at the Old Testament.
Yeah.
There's so many times that God is doing, like the book of Habakkuk, like you go back and you look at like, we don't understand or don't like what God is doing, but God is ultimately doing something for good. Mm-hmm. And sometimes there's a pathway through pain that gets us to the good, whether it's for others or what God is trying to create in us, or for his glory and his purposes, which is what we are here for on this earth.
Right.
You know, like we're not the center of the story.
Absolutely, man. Josh, thanks so much for spending time with me today. This has been incredible. I want to make sure everybody, we'll put links at the bottom of if you're on a podcast platform, in the show notes, if you're watching this on YouTube, right below this, Into the Storm, How to Face Down Any Crisis with Deep, Unshakable Faith. We barely scratched the surface on this today. So make sure that you pick this book up. And then if you're a pastor, if you're a ministry leader, look into the 1010 Project. This stuff is amazing. Josh, where can we follow you? Where can we connect with you more?
Yeah, I mean, all I have is Instagram that I'm not on a ton, but this is the only thing I have. It's Joshua Turner, because there's the country music singer Josh Turner,
that's true. Yeah,
you know what I mean. I just call him Josh Turner number 2. That's it. But yeah, Joshua Turner.
You're more of a cowboy than him, though. I'll just
I don't know. I wish. I wish I had that voice. I know, right? But yeah, Joshua Turner on Instagram, and then the book is just on Amazon under Josh B. Turner. Once again, because of the country music singer. But then the 1010 Project, if people want to look at it, it's 1010project.com, and that's the number 10 and the word 10 project.com. So,
great.
Yep.
That's great. Man, thanks for sharing the space with us, sharing your life with us. Appreciate
it's an honor.
Spaces you're creating. It's awesome to have you. Thanks for joining us for today's episode of the Nothing is Wasted podcast. We hope you enjoyed our conversation and found it as encouraging and insightful as we did. Now, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you like to listen, and leave us a rating and review. Your feedback helps us to connect to those who need these stories of hope and healing most, and to reach more listeners just like you. Also, subscribe to our Nothing is Wasted Ministries YouTube channel. Now, be sure to stay connected with us on social media. You can follow us at Nothing is Wasted Ministries. Follow me at Davey Blackburn. We'd love to interact with you. So be sure to stop by and let us know how these conversations are impacting you and your story. And if you want to learn more about all the incredible resources we have available to help you navigate whatever valley you're walking through, visit our website at nothingiswasted.com. If you're ready to get started in your journey towards healing and finding purpose in your pain, we'd love to help. Simply go to nothingiswasted.com/start here for your next step. We want to thank our guests, and we want to thank you, our Nothing is Wasted community, for tuning in regularly. Remember, no matter what challenges you face, whatever pain you are walking through, nothing is wasted. We'll see you next time for another incredible conversation here on the Nothing is Wasted podcast. But before you go, check out this short clip from our next episode. Thanks for joining us, friends.
And sometimes I listen to myself saying these things right now, Davey, and I could, in 10 minutes from now, I could be in a pit again. You're just constantly, you're up and down, and I'm feeling strength, and I'm able to share and talk. And I know these things are deep in my life, and I rest in them. But there's a constant fight and a constant battle. And there's days and weeks where I just want to live in the pit, and I don't want to stay there.
Yeah.